Hello, welcome to Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is all about decimals, right? So we've sort of done whole numbers, we've done integers, right? Positive and negative whole numbers. We did a brief detour and we talked about equations a little bit, and a little algebra. Then we came back to the number systems, we did fractions, and now we're gonna move on to decimals. So I will just sort of start with an example. What do decimals look like? So the format, right? Decimal numbers look something like this. So what we would say, this is 315 and 246 thousandths. Sort of informally, 315.246. Right, we'll go through the full sort of naming thing. The idea, what is a decimal, what is happening? So this is an alternate way, it's sort of an alternate system. To write numbers between the whole number values. So, an alternative to fractions. It turns out that there are actually decimal numbers. We'll go through all the details and stuff. In general, you can convert a decimal into a fraction and vice versa. Although it turns out there are certain decimal numbers. There are possible decimal numbers that cannot be turned into a fraction. In theory, any sort of a fraction can be turned into a decimal, but not necessarily vice versa. So the way this whole system works, right, is you have in front 315, that would be the whole number. If we were going to kind of break this down. In the middle, right, what we're going to use here is this sort of period. This is our decimal point. That's kind of the distinguishing line between the whole numbers and then the kind of decimal or fractional values. In some number systems, they actually use a comma there instead of a decimal point, so that can be a little confusing if you've ever done, I think it's the French notation. If you've ever used that, it's a comma instead of a decimal place. We're just using our sort of American notation here, so that's what we're going to stick with, but just sort of something to generally be aware of if you're ever doing math in different places or talking to people who have done it in different places. And then the 246 here, so this would sort of be what we would call, the fractional part, meaning that its right value in total is less than 1. So 315 just means the whole number, 315. The decimal point we're using to kind of distinguish between the whole number and the fractional value. And then we have this sort of 0.246. So we need to obviously establish what that means, what 0.246 means. And kind of to help us do that, we'll go through the naming of it, which then kind of relates to how you would maybe write it as a fraction. I don't know. We're not going to necessarily do all of that right this second. The way this works, really all this is just an extension of our place value chart. So decimal values are an extension of our sort of, I think, chapter 1, section 1. I mean, I think it was literally section 1.1, place value table. And so if we think of that, so let's stick with 315 here. point, right? 246. So if we think of the place values, right? So what were those? Well, kind of moving from smallest to biggest, right? This was just the ones place was the 5, right? Everything kind of goes up by values of 10. So it's you know, digits 0 through 9, so in the ones, and then you go up. So then it's the tens, right? So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. And then you jump from tens up to hundreds. And then from there, you know, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, 10 millions, 100 millions, and on and on and on. So, right, this would be sort of tens, this would be ones, hundreds. Each digit, right, in those place values is worth, right? So in the ones place, each digit is worth kind of 1 unit of value. In the tens place, each digit is worth 10 times that amount. In the hundreds, every digit there is worth 100 times that amount. So the 3 here really stands for 300, right? The 1 there stands just for 10, and the 5 stands for 5. So what would happen if we then extended that back? So again, the decimal point kind of here in the middle. So this is sort of hundreds, tens, ones. You know, to do this, we're sort of dividing by 10 each time, right? So this is 100 divided by 10 is 10, 10 divided by 10 is 1. And so if I kept this going, what I would get is sort of a 1/10, right? I get sort of a 1/10, and then if I kept going from there, I would get maybe a 1/100, and from there, a 1/1000 type values. So I'm not going into negative values, right? So a decimal is not a mixture of positives and negatives. You know, it's not that, it's all one number. So the idea is that every digit, as you go further and further to the right, the value that the digit has is sort of decreasing by a factor of 10. It's getting divided by 10. So if I get all the way down to sort of whole numbers, the ones place, and I divide by 10 again, I get these kind of fractional values. So this would be sort of 1, you know, every digit here is worth 1/10 of that amount. So a 0.2 really is the same thing as sort of 2/10. A point, you know, the 4 in this position would really be a 4/100. The 6 here would really be 6/1000. All of that stuff is sort of happening. The names of these, what we're going to do is sort of go by the fractional kind of naming convention, which is, well, 1/10 is 1/10 with a TH. And so this place value is the tenths with a TH. So it's tens for the whole number, just the S, and it's tenths with the TH as a decimal. Notice we're sort of skipping over what would be sort of a oneths place, right? We kind of go from 1, and if we divide by 10, we get 1/10, and so we're sort of, you know, 1 is almost the baseline here, the ones value, and so we have kind of from tens to the left and tenths to the right. And then obviously you probably can imagine the next one would be hundredths with a TH. Hundredths with a TH. And then squeezed in over here, right? 1/1000 would be thousandths with a TH. You know, from there, right, if we kept going, we would get 10,000ths, right, would be the 4th decimal place. 100. Thousandths, right, would be the 5th decimal place, and so on and so forth. So what these place values tell us, just in the same way that the place values kind of gave us the names of the whole numbers, the place values also will tell us sort of how to say or write a decimal value. And so the convention is you have the whole number and then you go and, so this is where we'd say, you know, whole number, so in this case 315, right, 315, and the decimal value, and what you're going to do to sort of say the decimal value or write the decimal value is you essentially just say what the number is. So in this case, 246. So 246, and then what you do is you obviously don't say just 246. You go 246, and then you say, in this case, you go to the last place value, the thousandths. You say 246 thousandths. So 315 and 246 thousandths. The way that we sort of say that and name that is going to tie directly into how we sort of write these as fractions. We'll do those conversions here in the next video. Let me do one more just sort of quick example. So maybe something just kind of short, 45, and let's change it up. Let's go 0075. So how do we say or write this number? So this is 45, 0.0075. So we need to watch the place values. So this is tenths, hundredths, thousands. This is going to be, right, 4 decimal places is going to be 10 thousands, right, with a TH, right? So we get that place value going, and so then to write it, we're going to say, so 45 is 45, and, right, transition from the whole numbers to the decimals. The decimal here is 75, right? It doesn't necessarily matter if we have these extra zeros in front. It's a 75, but it's shifted further to the right. So it is a 75, but it has less and less place value. So 45 and 75, but it's 75 10,000ths, right? So it's the number, but it's, in that decimal place value. So it's and 75 10,000ths. And that's the idea for how we would sort of say that number, or, to sort of write it out long form like we would on a check or something. I'll pause this video here and we'll keep going in the next one.